Gunfire tears through the desert night. A wounded woman screams Emily's name as a German shepherd lunges into the dark. In the chaos, a former Navy SEAL fights through smoke and sand to save the only person who ever made him believe again. But as the flames rise, betrayal returns. An old comrade turned enemy hunts them down, hiding among the townsfolk, waiting for his moment to strike. Love becomes the target, faith becomes the weapon, and when Emily is taken, one man and his dog will face hell itself to bring her home. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God plants even in the middle of war. The Arizona desert burned like a furnace beneath the mid-July sun, a sea of gold and rust stretching endlessly toward the blurred horizon. Heat shimmered in waves above the sand, twisting the air into mirages of water that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Against this harsh canvas, a lone figure trudged forward, a young woman whose every step seemed to defy the will of the desert itself. Her name was Emily Parker, 28 years old, with chestnut hair that once gleamed like polished wood, but now clung in sweat-damp strands beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat. Her fair Boston skin, unused to the western sun, was now burned raw across the cheeks and neck. Once an idealist and dreamer, her soft brown eyes that once saw promise in the world, now flickered only with fatigue. The hem of her blue cotton dress was torn, the fabric stiff with dust, and the boots she had bought second-hand in Phoenix were splitting at the seams. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her blistered feet. But she kept walking, clutching a small leather satchel tight against her chest. Inside were all that remained of her life: a teaching certificate, a worn Bible, and a photograph of her parents, both long gone. Emily had come west chasing a dream. When she received the letter offering her a teaching position in Copper Ridge, she had imagined laughter in sunlit classrooms, children eager to learn, and a small but dignified life built on purpose. But when she arrived, she found only silence, shattered windows, doors hanging from broken hinges, and a church bell half buried in sand. The copper mine had gone dry months earlier. The town had bled out like a wounded animal, leaving behind nothing but ghosts and sand. For 3 days, Emily had wandered the ruins, knocking on empty doors, asking questions no one could answer. On the 4th day, she made her decision. Phoenix lay nearly 100 miles southeast. If she could just reach the highway, perhaps some kind soul would stop for her. But the desert had no mercy for the desperate. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her canteen empty since yesterday. The sky itself seemed to press down on her, heavy with heat. Her vision blurred as she stumbled over a rock, catching herself with trembling hands. She tried to steady her breath, whispering words her mother once said, "Keep walking, Emily, even when the road disappears." But her mother was long dead, taken by illness the year before, and the memory only deepened her loneliness. As she lifted her head, the world swayed. In the distance, she thought she saw a horseman moving through the heat waves, but the desert had tricked her before. She blinked, and the shape wavered, then vanished. The sound of wind filled her ears, a dry whistling sound like a kettle left on the stove too long. She took another step, then another. The world tilted. Her body gave way. She collapsed face first into the sand. When she woke, the sun had shifted westward. The light was softer, tinged with gold. A shadow loomed over her, broad, dark, and solid. Then came a low voice, rough but steady. "Easy there, ma'am. You're safe now." She blinked and saw Jack Harris kneeling beside her. He was in his mid-30s, tall and powerfully built, with sun-browned skin and arms marked by old scars. His short black hair was streaked with dust, and a trimmed beard framed a square, determined jaw. His eyes, gray-blue, sharp as steel, spoke of a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. There was discipline in the way he moved, every motion deliberate, quiet. Jack had once been a Navy SEAL, one of the best, until a mission in Syria left him with a bullet scar near his ribs and the burden of 2 men he couldn't save. He had walked away from the service after that, settling in Sonora, where the silence of the desert felt more honest than the noise of the world. Beside him stood Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a thick tan and black coat and intelligent amber eyes. The dog's movements were precise, every sense alert. A faint scar ran along his left flank, earned perhaps from the same life of battle that shaped his master. Rex sniffed Emily's hand gently, then sat back, waiting for command. Jack lifted his canteen to Emily's lips. "Small sips," he said. His tone was firm, but his touch was gentle. The first trickle of water felt like life itself. Emily gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely. Jack nodded. "You're lucky I was passing through. Nobody should be out here alone." I was trying to get to Phoenix," she said weakly. "I thought there'd be a town, but—" "Copper Ridge?" he asked. When she nodded, he exhaled, looking toward the horizon. "Yeah, that place died last winter. You wouldn't find a soul there now." The realization hit her anew, but this time she didn't have the strength to cry. Jack studied her for a moment, then slung her satchel over his shoulder and scooped her up in his arms as if she weighed nothing. "I've got a ranch a few miles from here," he said. "You'll rest there until you can stand again." Rex trotted beside them as Jack carried her toward a distant ridge. Emily's head rested against his shoulder. She could smell the faint trace of leather, sun, and sweat, real human things that made her feel grounded again. For the first time in days, she closed her eyes and let herself believe she might live. When they reached the top of the ridge, she caught sight of a wide valley below, a patchwork of dry grass, scattered mesquite trees, and a cluster of low buildings near a dried riverbed. The setting sun bathed it all in molten light. "That's Harris Ranch," Jack said quietly. "Not much to look at, but it's home." As they descended, Emily's consciousness began to fade again, lulled by the steady rhythm of Jack's footsteps and Rex's quiet panting. She wondered what kind of man this stranger was, why he lived so far from everyone, why his eyes seemed to carry both strength and sorrow. But before she could form another thought, darkness claimed her once more. When she awoke again, she was lying on a bed inside a small cabin, her feet bandaged, the scent of wood smoke and boiled herbs filling the air. A woman's voice, warm, accented, murmured nearby. "Easy now, señorita. You are safe. You rest." Emily turned her head and saw Maria Delgado, a woman in her 50s with copper skin, salt and pepper hair braided neatly down her back, and eyes that carried the calm of someone who had raised too many children not her own. She wore a simple dress and a cross pendant that gleamed in the firelight. "You will be fine," Maria said kindly. "You have strong spirit. I can see it." Emily tried to thank her, but the words barely formed. Her last glimpse before drifting back into sleep was of Rex lying near the door, watching her with quiet devotion, and Jack standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dying sun, arms crossed, face unreadable. Outside, the desert wind rose again, carrying the promise of another scorching day. But far to the south, beneath the blood-red horizon, a dust cloud was forming, a rider moving fast across the flats, heading straight toward Harris Ranch. When Emily opened her eyes again, the desert sun had softened into morning gold, spilling through the thin curtains of a small wooden cabin. Her body still ached, but the scent of coffee and bread reminded her she was alive. Outside, she heard the low rumble of a man's voice and the deep bark of a dog. The world had become warm again, not from the sun, but from the faint hum of life around her. Jack Harris stood by the porch, rolling up his sleeves as he repaired a wooden trough near the fence. In daylight, his presence seemed less like a shadow and more like something solid and grounding. His movements were precise, efficient, the habits of a soldier who still fought invisible wars within himself. He had changed into a clean gray shirt and worn jeans, his hair still damp from washing, his beard neatly trimmed. Each motion was quiet strength. Near him, Rex patrolled the yard, nose down, tail flicking, occasionally glancing at the door as if making sure Emily was still there. "Morning," Emily said softly, stepping outside in the borrowed dress that Maria had left for her. The fabric smelled faintly of soap and sage. Jack looked up, shading his eyes with a hand. "You're up. How are you feeling?" "Alive, thanks to you," she replied, offering a small, shy smile. "And your dog, of course?" Rex wagged his tail at the mention, trotting closer. Jack chuckled. "He's got a better sense of people than I do sometimes." From behind Emily, Maria Delgado appeared carrying a tray with 2 mugs of coffee. Her copper skin gleamed in the sunlight, and her face carried that steady kindness that only those who've survived much could offer. "Drink," she said gently, handing one to Emily. "It helps you find your strength again." "Thank you," Emily said, her hands trembling slightly as she took the mug. "I'll find a way to repay all this." Maria shook her head. "The desert doesn't do favors, señorita. It trades kindness for kindness. You will give back in your own time." Later that morning, Jack led Emily on a slow walk through the property. Harris Ranch stretched across several acres of tough, stubborn land, the kind that refused to surrender even to drought. A few cows grazed by the sparse patches of grass, while a small barn leaned tiredly near the corral. To the east, the remains of a riverbed cut through the valley like a scar, its stones glinting under the sun. "This used to be full of water," Jack said quietly, pointing to it. 10 years ago, before the company dammed the flow upstream. Took the life right out of this land. Folks moved away after that." Emily looked at him, sensing the weight beneath his words. "And you stayed?" He nodded. "Someone has to. Land like this doesn't just die, it waits. You just have to learn how to live alongside it." They walked in silence for a while. Emily noticed that although Jack spoke with the roughness of a man used to commands, his eyes softened. When he looked toward the horizon, he wasn't cold, just careful, like a man who had built walls around himself and then forgotten how to open the gate. Inside the ranch house, Maria prepared lunch, while a tall, wiry man entered through the back door. He was about 50, his face weathered from years in the sun, with gray stubble and deep smile lines. "Morning, boss," he said, tipping his hat at Jack. "This is Gus Bradley," Jack introduced. "He runs the kitchen and whatever else needs running." Gus grinned at Emily, revealing a missing front tooth that only made his smile more genuine. "Heard about you, ma'am. Must have been a hell of a walk to end up here." "It was," Emily admitted. "I'm lucky your boss found me." "Boss?" Gus snorted. "He's just another stubborn soul trying to keep this dust alive. You'll see." They shared lunch under the shade of a mesquite tree, a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and sweet iced tea. It had been years since Emily had eaten with others who weren't rushing or judging. The silence between bites felt comforting. Afterward, she wandered to the fence line where a few local children had gathered, curious about the newcomer. The oldest, a boy of 12 named Miguel, Maria's grandson, had sharp brown eyes and a wary smile. "Are you really a teacher?" he asked. "I am," Emily said, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. "Or I was." "My mama never went to school," a little girl behind him added. "We can't read the letters that come sometimes from town." Emily looked back at Jack, who stood watching from the porch. Something stirred within her, a spark of purpose she thought the desert had burned away. "Would you like to learn?" she asked the children, their faces lit up as if she'd offered them treasure. "We don't got a school," Miguel said. "It fell apart years ago." "Then we'll make one," Emily replied, surprising even herself with the certainty in her voice. That night, Emily sat on the porch beside Jack as the desert wind whispered through the dry grass. The stars above Sonora were so bright they seemed alive. "You really mean to teach them?" Jack asked, sipping from a tin cup of coffee. "Yes," she said firmly. "They deserve it. They all do?" Jack leaned back in his chair, regarding her quietly. "You remind me of someone," he said after a long pause. "My sister, before she passed. She used to talk like that, like the world could still be fixed if we just tried hard enough." "I'm sorry," Emily said softly. He shrugged, his voice low. "She was killed in an accident. Drunk driver back in Dallas. I left the Navy soon after. Couldn't stomach the noise any more." He stared into the darkness, the pain in his words raw but contained. Emily didn't speak, just reached over and touched his hand lightly. For a moment he didn't pull away. Then Rex patted over, resting his head on Jack's knee as if to remind them both that the world still held warmth. Days passed quickly after that. Word spread across the valley that a teacher had come. Farmers, widows, and ranch hands started bringing wood, nails, and anything they could spare. Jack helped lead the construction, while Maria organized the women to sew curtains and gather books. Gus turned every meal into a gathering, feeding volunteers who worked under the blazing sun. Even Rex carried scraps of cloth and tools in his mouth, earning laughter from the children. By the end of the second week, a small schoolhouse stood by the edge of the dried river, walls rough but proud, windows shining like hope itself. Emily's heart swelled when she stepped inside. On the wall, someone had carved words into the fresh wood. "To learn is to live again." That evening, as the sky turned copper and violet, the sound of distant hoofbeats echoed across the valley. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching. Jack stood up, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. A lone rider was approaching, the same dust trail that Emily had seen before she fainted in the desert. Jack's expression hardened. "That's strange," he murmured. "No one rides this way after dark." Rex growled low, the fur on his back bristling. Emily stepped beside Jack, her pulse quickening. The rider slowed, the setting sun painting his figure in silhouette, broad shoulders, a wide-brimmed hat, and the glint of something metallic strapped to his hip. Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay inside, Emily. I've seen that kind of man before." And as the horse drew nearer, the wind carried a voice that seemed to scrape across the valley like a blade, rough, familiar, and full of history Jack had tried to bury. The stranger arrived just as the sun dipped behind the mesas, turning the Sonora sky into a sheet of molten copper. Dust clung to his boots as he dismounted his black horse, the animal's breath steaming in the cooling air. He removed his hat, revealing a face cut from stone, sharp cheekbones, dark stubble shadowing his jaw, and eyes the color of burned whiskey. He looked like a man used to long rides and longer silences. "Evening," he said, his voice low and rough, carrying the drawl of someone who'd spent too many years on the road. Jack Harris stood on the porch, one hand resting on the railing, the other near the revolver at his side. "Evening," he answered carefully. "You're far from any town. What brings you out here?" The man smiled faintly, though the smile never touched his eyes. "Name's Ethan Cole," he said. "Was riding south to Yuma. Heard there's a ranch out this way that might sell feed and water. I don't mean trouble." Ethan Cole, at least that's what he called himself, was in his late 30s, lean and sinewy, with sun-cracked skin and a faded scar cutting from his temple to his ear. His clothes were travel-worn, dust coating his duster and boots. There was something about his posture, too controlled, too measured, that made Rex growl under his breath. Jack hesitated. He had seen men like this before, the kind whose stories didn't match their eyes. But the desert could kill faster than a bullet, and hospitality was still law in these parts. "We've got a well," Jack said finally. "Water your horse, then come inside. Maria'll fix you something to eat." Inside, the air was cooler, scented with mesquite smoke and stew. Emily sat by the table, her fingers tracing lines in an open book, practicing tomorrow's lesson. She looked up as the stranger entered. "Who's this?" "Traveler," Jack said simply. "Name's Cole?" Ethan nodded politely to her. "Ma'am." His gaze lingered just long enough to unsettle her before he turned to Maria, who was already setting down a bowl of stew and a tin cup. "You're kind, Senora," he said, his tone smooth, too practiced. Maria eyed him briefly, then crossed herself as she walked back to the stove. "Kindness is cheap in this house," she murmured, "but it is not free." Dinner passed with cautious silence. Ethan spoke little, answering questions with the barest words. Yet every now and then his eyes flicked toward Jack in a way that carried history, something neither of them dared name. Emily noticed the tension, how Jack's shoulders never quite relaxed, how Rex never took his eyes off the stranger. After the meal, Ethan thanked them and asked if he might stay the night in the barn. "I'll move on by dawn," he said. Jack agreed, but only after checking the man's horse and saddlebags himself. He found nothing suspicious, just a rifle, a bedroll, and a flask. But the unease remained. Later that night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of her small cabin, watching the stars shimmer above the desert. The faint strains of a harmonica drifted from the barn, Ethan playing a slow, mournful tune. It wasn't beautiful, but it was haunting. Something about it made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. Maybe pity, maybe fear. The next morning dawned bright and cloudless. By the time Emily reached the new schoolhouse, half the valley's children were already waiting outside. Miguel, the Delgado twins, and even a few ranch hands who wanted to learn their letters. She greeted them warmly, her smile genuine despite the shadows under her eyes. Teaching brought her peace, a sense of purpose that nothing else could. Inside, the schoolhouse smelled of pine and dust. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching in the chalk dust that hung in the air. "All right," Emily said, clapping her hands. "Today, we're learning words that describe who we are." As the class began to recite, the door creaked open. To her surprise, Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said with an easy grin. "Just thought I'd see what all the noise was about." Emily hesitated. "You're welcome to listen," she said carefully, "but the children are shy around strangers." Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "Reckon I'll sit quiet then." He watched as Emily guided the children through reading and writing, his gaze steady, unreadable. There was curiosity there, but also calculation, like a man measuring something only he understood. By noon, he'd made himself useful, helping repair a loose shutter and fetching water from the well. To everyone else, he seemed polite, even friendly. But Jack wasn't fooled. He'd seen the way Ethan's eyes scanned the property, how his questions about the ranch's layout came wrapped in idle conversation. That evening, after the children left, Jack found Ethan near the corral, cleaning his saddle. "You said you were heading to Yuma," Jack said quietly. "Still true?" Ethan looked up with that same unreadable smile. "Plans change. Might stick around a bit, lend a hand. Lot of hard work here." Jack's jaw tightened. "We don't need strangers' hands." "Don't think you got much choice," Ethan said, his voice turning cold. "Desert's a lonely place. Sometimes it's safer with company." Rex barked sharply, breaking the moment. The two men stared at each other, an old recognition flashing between them. Two soldiers, both marked by wars no one else remembered. That night, the air grew heavy with thunder. A rare summer storm rolled in, lightning splitting the sky. Inside her cabin, Emily woke to the sound of Rex barking wildly. She grabbed her shawl and rushed outside. The barn door swung open in the wind, and Ethan's horse was gone. Jack burst from the main house, rifle in hand. "He's gone?" Emily asked, shouting over the rain. "Yeah," Jack said grimly, eyes scanning the darkness, "and he took something." They found the storage door broken, a trunk pried open, inside old military equipment, maps, and sealed documents Jack had kept hidden since his days in the Navy. Only a few were missing, but it was enough. Emily looked at him, fear rising. "Jack, who is he?" Jack's jaw clenched. Rain dripped from his hair as he stared into the night. "Someone who used to be on my side," he said quietly, "until he wasn't." A flash of lightning revealed something glinting far beyond the ridge, a signal mirror catching the storm light. Then it vanished into the dark. The morning after Ethan Cole's disappearance dawned heavy and gray. The rare desert rain had washed away the dust, leaving the world smelling of wet earth and mesquite. But for Jack Harris, the freshness of the air did nothing to ease the knot in his chest. He stood near the broken storage shed, staring at the scattered remnants of his past, the shattered lock, the torn maps, the empty trunk that once held classified Navy documents. His jaw was tight, and a muscle flickered in his cheek every time the wind stirred. Emily watched him from the porch, her shawl wrapped tight against the chill. She had never seen him like this, his usual calm replaced by a hard, restrained fury. "Jack," she said softly, "whatever he took, we can replace it." Jack shook his head. "Not what he took, Emily. What he knows." He crouched, picking up a torn scrap of paper, a fragment of a tactical diagram marked with military coordinates. "That's enough to ruin people or get them killed." Rex padded close, his wet coat shining in the pale light, and whined as if sensing his master's unease. Jack rested a hand on the dog's head. "We'll find him, boy. I promise." Maria Delgado appeared behind Emily, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The lines on her face looked deeper this morning, and her voice trembled faintly. "He was bad wind, that one. You could feel it. I prayed last night for the ranch, for all of us." Jack nodded, but said nothing. He'd seen men like Ethan before, soldiers who'd lost their cause and tried to sell what was left of it. But what haunted him most was that Ethan hadn't come by chance. Someone must have told him where to look. By midday, the rain had stopped, and the sun began its slow return. Jack saddled his horse, checking the rifle slung at his back. Emily followed him to the gate, her face pale. "You're going after him." He looked at her for a long moment. "He won't go far. He needs water, and the nearest supply's the Silver Basin. I'll find him before he finds anyone else." "I should come with you," she said impulsively, then flushed when he turned to her in surprise. "I mean, you might need help." Jack's expression softened, though the worry didn't leave his eyes. "You've done enough, Emily. Stay here. Keep the children safe if they come for lessons. I'll be back by nightfall." Rex whined as if disagreeing. Jack glanced down at him. "No, you're staying too," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. The dog tilted his head, then barked once, a short, determined sound. Emily smiled faintly. "He's not listening," she said. Jack sighed. "He never does." By afternoon, man and dog were gone, riding west through the shimmering desert heat. The ranch fell into uneasy quiet. Emily tried to distract herself with the school children, but her mind kept wandering to the image of Jack alone in the wilderness. As the sun lowered, she gathered the students around and read them a story from a worn Bible, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Maria watched from the doorway, knitting silently, her dark eyes sharp with worry. At dusk, the sound of hooves returned, but not from the west. Emily stepped outside, hand shielding her eyes. A wagon approached from the road leading north, pulled by a pair of old mules. The driver was a woman, thin in her early 40s, with sunburned skin and a scarf tied around her head. "Evening," the woman called, pulling the reins. "Is this Harris Ranch?" "It is," Emily replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" The woman climbed down, dusting off her faded skirt. "Name's Sarah Whitmore," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was strong, her voice confident. "I run a small supply line from Prescott. Heard you folks been building a school out here. Thought you might need books, chalk, maybe paper." Emily felt a rush of relief at the normalcy of it. "Yes, we do, actually. Come in, please. You must be tired." Sarah smiled, though her eyes flicked around the property in quiet assessment. "I'll just unhitch the team first." As evening deepened, Sarah shared dinner with Emily and Maria. She spoke easily about her travels, long roads through ghost towns, trading food for leather, carrying letters between distant homesteads. But there was something rehearsed in her stories, a smoothness that didn't match her weathered hands. Emily noticed how Sarah asked about the ranch's defenses, about the people living there, and where the men were tonight. When Sarah excused herself to fetch something from the wagon, Maria leaned close and whispered, "That woman talks too much for someone who rides alone. Be careful, Nina." Emily nodded, uneasy now. Rex wasn't there to bark, and Jack was still gone. The night outside pressed heavy against the windows. Hours later, after Sarah had been shown to the spare room, Emily sat at her small desk, writing in her journal. Her lamp flickered as a dry wind slipped through the cracks. She paused when she heard a soft creak from the hallway, the sound of a door closing, then another. Quietly, she rose and opened her own door just in time to see a figure, Sarah, moving toward the back of the house, a lantern in hand. Emily followed silently, her bare feet light on the wood floor. Sarah stepped out onto the porch and vanished into the darkness beyond the barn. Emily's breath quickened. She grabbed her shawl and went after her, the night air biting against her skin. From behind the barn, faint voices drifted. Two of them! She crouched low and peered around the corner. Sarah stood beside a man, his hat low over his face, his stance unmistakable. Ethan Cole. "I told you she's here," Sarah was saying. "And the papers?" Ethan nodded, holding up a small packet wrapped in oilcloth. "Got what I needed? But there's more in the house. Harris must have hidden the rest." Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. She took a step back, but the heel of her boot snapped a twig. Both heads turned sharply. Ethan's voice cut through the night. "Who's there?" Emily ran. Her heart pounded as she sprinted toward the house, skirts tangling around her legs. Behind her, Ethan cursed and gave chase. She burst through the front door, slamming it shut and bolting it. Maria appeared from the kitchen, eyes wide with fear. "Emily, what?" "Get the gun!" Emily gasped. "He's here! Ethan's here!" Before Maria could move, the door shook under a heavy blow. The wood splintered. Emily grabbed the rifle from above the fireplace, hands trembling, and aimed it at the door. The second strike cracked the hinges. The door flew open, rain and dust swirling in. Ethan stepped through, eyes burning with fury. "Put it down, teacher," he growled. "I just need what's mine." But before she could answer, Rex's bark shattered the air outside. A distant gunshot followed, and then another. Maria screamed. Emily froze, heart hammering, as the silhouette of a man appeared in the doorway behind Ethan. The flash of lightning illuminated a familiar face. Jack Harris, rifle raised, soaked in sweat and rain. "Step away from her, Cole," he said coldly. Ethan turned, a smirk twisting his mouth. "Took you long enough, soldier." And in that charged silence the storm broke open again. The storm raged like a living thing, thunder cracking over the valley as if the sky itself wanted to break the earth apart. Lightning flashed through shattered windows, illuminating the tense standoff inside the cabin. Jack Harris stood in the doorway, rifle raised, rain dripping from his hair and coat. Across from him, Ethan Cole held his revolver steady, his eyes gleaming like glass in the flickering light. Behind Ethan, Sarah Whitmore moved silently, her expression torn between fear and resolve. "Put it down, Cole," Jack said again, voice steady despite the storm. "It's over." Ethan's smile twisted, bitter and knowing. "Over? It was over the day you left me behind in Mosul, remember that?" His tone was venomous, the words a wound that had never healed. "You got your medal. I got a bullet and a dishonorable discharge." Jack's grip tightened. "You sold intel, Ethan. You killed our own. I should have dragged you back in chains." Lightning lit Ethan's face, every line carved deep by anger, by guilt, by years of survival. He looked like a man who'd been hollowed out by regret and filled again with hate. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed. "You're just another killer who learned to smile about it." Emily, standing near the hearth, could barely breathe. The two men seemed carved from the same stone, both scarred, both haunted. Sarah stood by the wall, hands clenched. When Ethan glanced at her, she looked away. "Ethan," she said softly, "this isn't the way." "Shut up!" he snapped without turning. "You had your chance to walk away." Rex growled, low and steady, muscles coiled. Jack took a step forward. "You're not leaving with those files," he said, "and you're not hurting anyone else." Ethan laughed, but it was a broken sound. "You can't stop me, Jack. You never could." He raised his revolver. The world exploded into motion. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Emily screamed. Jack dove aside, firing once. The bullet hit Ethan's shoulder, spinning him backward into the table. Papers and glass shattered around him. Rex lunged, slamming into Ethan's arm before he could shoot again. They fell together in a chaos of snarls and shouts. "Rex!" Jack yelled, dropping the rifle and rushing forward. The dog's teeth flashed white in the lightning as he tore at Ethan's sleeve, trying to disarm him. Ethan's free hand grabbed a knife from his belt and slashed. Rex yelped and fell back, blood streaking his fur. Jack tackled Ethan before he could strike again. The two men crashed into the wall, fists and fury colliding. Emily ran to Rex, pressing her hands against the wound near his shoulder. "Stay with me," she whispered desperately. "You're all right, boy." Ethan fought like a man possessed, driven by years of betrayal and rage. He slammed Jack's head against the wall, then swung his knife. Jack blocked it with his forearm, the blade grazing his skin. With a surge of strength, he twisted Ethan's wrist and threw him hard to the floor. The knife skittered away. "Don't make me do this," Jack warned, breath ragged. Ethan looked up at him, blood streaking his face. "You already did," he spat, and lunged for the dropped revolver. The next shot was deafening. For a moment, everything froze, the rain, the thunder, even the wind. Ethan's body went still, then crumpled. The revolver clattered to the floor beside him. Jack stood motionless, chest heaving, the smoke from the barrel curling into the air like a ghost. Emily looked up from where she knelt by Rex, her face pale but steady. "Jack," she said quietly, "he was going to kill you." He nodded once, the weight of it sinking into him like a stone. "I know." Sarah, trembling, pressed herself against the far wall. Tears streaked her dirt-smeared cheeks. "He said it was just a job," she whispered. "Said he only wanted the documents. I didn't know it would come to this." Jack turned to her, eyes cold but not cruel. "Then you'd better start telling the truth. Who hired him?" Sarah hesitated, glancing toward Ethan's body. "A man named Vince Marlowe," she said finally, "out of Tucson. He runs a network, sells old government intel, weapons, anything with a price. Ethan said Harris Ranch had something valuable, something the Navy buried." Jack felt a chill worse than the rain. Vince Marlowe, the name brought back a memory of a mission file, a smuggler who vanished after selling classified data to foreign buyers. "He's still alive?" Jack muttered. Sarah nodded weakly. "Ethan said he wanted proof you still had the files, that he'd come himself if Ethan failed." Maria appeared in the doorway, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale as ash when she saw Ethan's body. "Dios mío," she murmured. Emily stood and crossed to her, guiding her away from the sight. Jack knelt beside Rex, checking the wound. The dog whimpered softly but licked his hand, tail thumping faintly. "He's tough," Jack said, voice breaking with relief. "He'll pull through." Emily pressed a clean cloth against the bleeding. "He saved your life." Jack met her eyes. "He saved all of us." They worked through the night to tend the wounded and clean up the wreckage. Sarah helped silently, her guilt heavy but genuine. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the air clear and still. Ethan's body lay covered outside beneath the mesquite tree. Jack would bury him at sunrise, enemy or not. He'd been a soldier once. As the first light touched the horizon, Emily stood beside Jack on the porch. Her hand brushed his arm. "It's over," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "Not yet. If Marlowe knows where we are, he'll come." From the barn, Rex barked once. A sharp, alert sound. Jack turned. Out by the distant ridge, a flicker of light flashed 3 times, like a signal mirror. Catching the sunrise, Jack's expression hardened. "He's already here." The morning sun rose like fire over the Sonora desert, washing the land in molten gold. Jack Harris stood beside the fence line, rifle slung across his shoulder, eyes fixed on the far ridge where the glinting signal had come from. The air was unnervingly still. Behind him, the ranch lay quiet, too quiet. The schoolhouse door creaked faintly in the wind, the flag limp against its pole. The storm had left scars everywhere, shattered windows, broken fences, and the scent of gunpowder still clinging to the dirt. Rex lay near the porch, his bandaged shoulder rising and falling with each breath. He had refused to rest once he sensed danger again. Every few seconds his ears twitched, nose flaring toward the distant hills. Jack crouched beside him, rubbing the dog's neck gently. "You're not done yet, are you, buddy?" Rex gave a soft grunt in reply. Emily Parker came out of the house, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth, sunlight glinting off her pale face. Exhaustion clung to her, but there was quiet determination in her eyes. "You saw the signal again?" she asked. "Yeah," Jack said. "Whoever it is, they're close. Maybe a mile out. Marlowe's smart. He'll wait till sundown. That gives us time." Sarah Whitmore stepped out behind Emily, her once proud posture now weighed down by guilt. Her clothes were still stained from the night's chaos. "You should run," she said, voice low but firm. "Marlowe's not like Ethan. He doesn't bluff. If he wants you dead, he'll burn this whole valley to get it." Jack looked at her, eyes cold. "You've seen him?" Sarah nodded. "Twice. Tall man, mid-40s, gray hair cropped short, walks like a soldier, but talks like a preacher. Charms you one minute, kills you the next. He runs everything from Tucson to El Paso. Guns, intel, men who'd slit their mother's throat for $1. Maria, standing in the doorway with a rosary in hand, whispered, "Then may God blind him before he finds us." Jack adjusted the strap on his rifle. "God won't stop him, Maria, but maybe I can." By noon, the heat had returned, shimmering across the valley floor. Jack gathered what ammunition remained, fortifying the barn and the house with barrels, sandbags, and broken furniture. Emily insisted on helping, her hands raw from hammering boards across the windows. "If we're staying," she said, breathless, "then we're fighting too." Jack glanced at her, half a smile touching his lips. "You don't know when to quit, do you?" "Neither do you," she shot back. By late afternoon, the horizon shifted. 3 dark figures appeared against the burning sky, riders approaching in formation. Jack raised his rifle's scope, and his heart sank. Vince Marlowe was unmistakable, tall, broad-shouldered, his tan duster whipping in the wind. A streak of gray cut through his black hair, and a jagged scar ran from his jawline to his collar. Even from a distance his presence carried command. He rode at the head of 2 armed men, Harlan Price, a red-bearded brute with a shotgun slung across his back, and Kenny Ruiz, a wiry Mexican in his 20s with a snake tattoo curling around his neck. "They're here," Jack said. Sarah's breath caught when she saw Marlowe. "Don't let him talk," she warned. "He'll twist every word till you doubt yourself." Jack nodded grimly. He won't get the chance. The sun hung low when the riders reached the gate. Marlowe dismounted first, brushing dust from his coat like a man arriving at church. "Jack Harris," he called, his voice deep and almost warm. "Been a long time since your kind wore a uniform." Jack stepped forward from the porch, rifle in hand. "You've got 1 minute to turn around." Marlowe chuckled softly. "And miss a reunion like this? I think not." He gestured to the hills. Shadows shifted, snipers hidden in the rocks. "I'd lower that rifle, son. You're surrounded." Rex growled beside Jack, hackles raised. Emily stood behind the window, gripping a revolver she barely knew how to use. Maria whispered prayers in Spanish. Jack's eyes never left Marlowe. "You came for what's in those files, but you should have remembered something." "Oh?" Marlowe's smile widened. Jack's voice hardened. "I'm not the man you ambushed back in Fallujah. I've learned to fight on my own ground." At that moment, Rex barked sharply, Jack's signal. From behind the barn, a hidden charge detonated, sending dirt and smoke into the air. The explosion startled the horses, scattering Marlowe's men. Jack opened fire, precise and measured. Harlan dropped first, the shotgun spinning from his hands. Kenny dove behind a trough, shouting in Spanish. Marlowe ducked low, returning fire. Bullets ripped through the porch rails. Emily flinched as splinters grazed her cheek. Rex dashed into the open, despite his wound, circling behind a fallen barrel to draw fire away from the house. "Rex, no!" Emily shouted, but Jack only yelled, "Stay down!" The firefight raged as the sun bled into the horizon. Jack moved like a ghost between cover, every motion disciplined, every shot deliberate. Marlowe advanced toward the barn, firing as he went, the grin on his face feral. "You always thought you could bury the past," he shouted, "but I'm the one who digs up ghosts." Jack's last bullet struck the ground near Marlowe's feet, throwing up dust. Marlowe seized the moment, charging forward. The two men collided in the dirt, fists and fury flying. Marlowe's strength was monstrous. Years of violence had hardened him into something beyond human. But Jack fought with something deeper, with the will to protect what remained of his soul. They struggled beside the trough, rolling through blood and mud. Marlowe swung a jagged knife, slicing across Jack's arm. Jack grunted, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted until bone cracked. The knife fell. Marlowe roared and lunged again, grabbing Jack by the throat. Then a gunshot echoed, not Jack's. From the porch, Emily stood with the revolver smoking in her hands. Marlowe froze, shock flickering across his face. A dark bloom spread across his chest. He looked down, mouth forming a silent curse, and crumpled into the dust. Silence followed. Even the wind seemed to stop. Jack staggered to his feet, breathing hard. Emily dropped the gun, trembling. Rex limped over and pressed his head against Jack's leg. The battle was done. Sarah sank to her knees, tears spilling freely. "He's gone," she whispered. "It's over." Jack looked at the fallen men, the wrecked barn, the setting sun. "No," he said quietly. "It's finished." That night, the people of the valley gathered at the ranch, lighting lanterns for the dead and for the living. Children clung to Emily's dress, asking if school would still open tomorrow. She smiled through her tears and said, "Yes, it has to." Weeks later, life returned to the valley. The schoolhouse stood repaired, its roof gleaming new under the August sun. Emily taught by day, and at night she and Jack rebuilt the ranch together. Sarah stayed on, helping as penance for her betrayal, and Maria's laughter once again filled the kitchen. Rex, scarred but proud, lay in the yard watching it all like a guardian carved of loyalty and light. On the first Sunday of September, beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree, Emily and Jack were married. The air smelled of wildflowers and dust. Miguel played a battered harmonica, while Maria threw rose petals in the wind. Jack, wearing his old service jacket, looked at Emily with quiet awe. "You saved me," he said softly. She smiled. "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." And as the sun set over Sonora, painting the world in amber and gold, Rex barked once, his tail thumping the earth. The desert wind carried the sound far across the valley, a reminder that even in the harshest land, love could still take root and bloom. When the dust settled, what stayed was not the battle, but the miracle. In that desert of loss, God planted hope. Jack, Emily, and Rex proved that even in the harshest places, faith still blooms. The true miracle wasn't surviving the storm. It was learning to forgive, to rebuild, and to love again. God was there in every heartbeat, in every sunrise, whispering, "You are never alone." If this story touched your heart, share it. Tell someone that miracles still happen, that God still moves through ordinary people and loyal hearts.